For decades, he was untouchable, a mogul, a visionary, a king of hip-hop. Sean Diddy Combs built an empire from the ground up. But now, it's all coming undone. Law and Crime's hit podcast series returns with a brand new season, The Rise and Fall of Diddy, the Federal Trial. Hosted by Jesse Weber, we pick up where the story left off. Now, as a federal sex trafficking and racketeering trial is underway, we go deeper into the allegations threatening to dismantle one of the most iconic legacies in entertainment history. Each week, we break down the courtroom drama as it happens, from explosive testimony to behind-the-scenes legal strategy to the questions on everyone's mind. How far will he fall? Or will he walk free but with a reputation in ruins? I'm about to play a clip from The Rise and Fall of Diddy, the Federal Trial. Follow the series on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts.
This podcast is made possible by daily court transcripts obtained by Law and Crime, along with on-the-ground reporting from our very own Elizabeth Milner embedded in the courtroom. In her opening statement, defense attorney Tenny Garagos wasted no time reframing the government's case, not as a criminal conspiracy, but as something much more familiar, a troubled relationship.
Tenny Garagos presented the opening statements for the defense, and she had to kind of admit while she was giving her opening statement and presenting this to the jury that Sean Combs is a complicated man, but she had said that this isn't a complicated case. She said that this is a case about real-life relationships that the government is turning into this RICO conspiracy and turning this into sex trafficking. She says this case isn't what we had heard about on the news and that essentially Diddy's story will be told over the next 2 months.
She also reminded jurors of who Sean Combs is, not just the man in handcuffs, but a music mogul whose influence shaped a generation.
She had kind of talked about how Diddy contributed to the culture and had a lot of great music, which drew a lot of people to him specifically, and that a lot of people just wanted to be around him because he would give them opportunities.
And then came a calculated moment of theater.
There was this moment during the defense opening statements where Diddy kind of stands up, Tenny introduces him to the jury, and mind you, when he's inside the court for his trial, he looks completely different than we've seen him in press photos, on red carpets, on even social media. He is kind of a little more toned down. He appears a lot grayer. He's wearing a sweater. He's wearing slacks, something that he might not wear if he wasn't detained in MDC Brooklyn or anything like that. But as far as just the picture that people may have of him in their minds, not necessarily the case that we're seeing inside that courtroom every day.
Then, Garagos turned to the government's claims of coercion and abuse, not to deny them, but to defang them.
And to answer to what the government had alleged in their opening statement, Tenny Garagos says that the government has no place in his bedroom, he being Diddy, and that the defense admits Diddy did have a temper, especially when he drinks, and sometimes he would get so angry, and they admitted that he did lie to his girlfriends. He was kind of mean to his girlfriends, but he's not charged with being mean. He's again charged with RICO and sex trafficking and transportation to engage in prostitution.
It was a deliberate strategy. Acknowledge the bad behavior, but draw a hard line between moral failings and a federal crime.
And so the defense says that the jury will see this possibly as a domestic violence case as opposed to a sex trafficking case, and even surprisingly admitted that Diddy had a certain love for a certain product, and that product being baby oil, something that they've essentially talked about every single day of trial. But according to Tenny Garagos, it's not a federal crime to have this love for baby oil, and says that the victims were capable, strong women, that they were adult women, they were free to make their own choices, and those choices came with pros and cons.
But with the infamous Intercontinental Hotel video on deck, the defense knew they had to get out ahead of what jurors were about to see.
They knew that a big piece of evidence was going to be introduced coming up, and that was going to be the really long played out version of a CNN video that we had seen nearly a year prior, and that being at the Intercontinental Hotel in 2016. But the defense really kind of had to drive home the point that Diddy is a flawed man, and they had to own up to that, because if they didn't own up to it and then the jurors would see this domestic violence at the hotel, then that could possibly ruin the case for the defense if they weren't forthcoming in their opening statements.
But legal observers say this opening wasn't just a narrative pivot, it was a technical one. Garagos wasn't simply trying to humanize Sean Combs. She was trying to dismantle the government's entire legal framework piece by piece. Natalie Whittingham-Burrell explains.
They did the thing that almost all defense attorneys do when you have bad facts that you can't overcome. You admit them and you minimize them.
The defense concedes Combs may have been controlling, violent even, but they argue it was personal, not organized, dysfunction, not conspiracy, private conduct, not enterprise-level crime.
They said that everything that the girlfriends, including Cassie, was doing was consensual, right? And that it had nothing to do with Bad Boy. It was all about Diddy personally and his personal toxic relationships, but that it had nothing to do with the actual organization of Bad Boy Records and therefore is not RICO. Personal proclivities may make you as an individual liable for things like rape, liable for things like the solicitation of prostitution, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's RICO. You need that organization there in order to say that it's a corrupt organization committing multiple crimes. And so that's the distinction that they're making. It's a very technical legal distinction.
And it's that distinction between personal wrongdoing and organizational corruption that will define the defense's case moving forward.
What they're asking the jury to do, the defense, what they're going to be asking the jury to do throughout the trial is set aside his personal proclivities, set aside that you may not agree with his lifestyle, and look and see whether or not these are individual failings or an organizational corruption.
So the defense had drawn its battle lines. Admit what you must, minimize the rest, and cast the crimes as personal failures, not federal ones. But now it was the government's turn to start proving otherwise. The prosecution's first witness wasn't a celebrity or a former insider. It was someone from the outside looking in, someone who had no connection to Diddy's empire, but who saw firsthand the aftermath of one of its most disturbing alleged incidents.
So the first person who was called to the witness stand was Officer Israel Flores. Now, he's a police officer for the Los Angeles Police Department, aka the LAPD. He had been working for LAPD for 7 years, but he also was an Army reservist. So I was kind of wondering, where is he going to go with this testimony? How does this relate to the case?
His relevance was soon made clear.
He had talked about another job that he had previously had, and that was working security. Once he had said security, I was like, oh, he must have worked for the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles, where we had all seen that video of Diddy brutally beating Cassie Ventura after she was trying to leave a freak off.
Flores wasn't there to speculate. He was there to explain what the footage couldn't, what happened just before the camera turned on. And
we learned a lot more of kind of everything that happened after the video was cut off.
According to Flores, a call came into the hotel's security office. A woman was in distress on the 6th floor. When he got there, the hallway was in disarray. Flowers scattered on the floor, a dent in the wall, and Cassie Ventura, visibly shaken, standing outside the elevator bank. He testified that surveillance footage, although motion-rigged and incomplete, captured Combs dragging Cassie down the hallway. He documented the incident in a written report and took photos of the damage. His testimony may have seemed simple, a security call, a hotel hallway, a traumatized woman, but for prosecutors, it was crucial. It put jurors in the aftermath of alleged violence. It gave them a timestamp, a setting, and a witness with no personal stake in the outcome. But it also did something else. It gave jurors a physical scene, one that matched the emotional and graphic claims the government would lay out in the weeks ahead. While Flores didn't speak to racketeering or trafficking, he helped the government draw a through line from private violence to public consequence, and he offered something the defense couldn't easily explain away: independent corroboration. Prosecutors would go on to call more personal, more graphic witnesses, but Flores' presence on the stand sent a clear message early in the trial. This story doesn't just live in Cassie's words or Diddy's world. It lives in evidence.
Listen to episodes of The Rise and Fall of Diddy, the Federal Trial, exclusively and ad-free, right now on Wondery Plus. Start your free trial in the Wondery app, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify.